Good morning, guys. Welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version. This is a 2018 standard release that I got for $48, which just sounds a little bit much for a high-grade, but as you can tell from the size of the box, this is going to be a rather tall model. So unlike most super robot model kits, this is actually a scale model. It's going to be in 1/144th scale, same as the Gundam high grades, because Mazinger Z is actually on the smaller side of super robots, standing at only, in quotes, 25 meters tall, which does give it a pretty good and easy size comparison in the real grade or high grade Sazabi. If you've built any of those, this is going to be around the same size as that, which is going to be quite large. So this is a rather important mecha in the terms of the history of mecha anime in general, because the original Mazinger Z show is widely considered to be the first modern mecha anime as we know it today. The Infinity version, of course, is from the Mazinger Z Infinity movie released in 2017 to celebrate the 45th anniversary of the series. So the version of Mazinger Z seen in the movie is the same Mazinger Z that was seen in the show, but it has been redesigned for modern audiences. And I'm of two minds on this redesign. On one hand, I really do love the new proportions that they gave this thing, because if you take a look at the original design, it's very retro, which you would expect from the first modern mecha anime, but its proportions might be a little bit off-putting to modern audiences. So I really do love the new proportions they gave it for this redesign. What I'm not the biggest fan of is the way they decided to make it a bit more gritty or realistic by putting a bunch of different armor plate separation all over the kit. As you can see from this box art, there's a ton of fracturing all over the armor of this kit, which does look a little bit odd in my opinion. If they dialed it down a little bit, I think it would be really cool, but as it is, it's a little bit funky, so I'm still not entirely sure how to feel about it. And I do wish we did get more lines in the Infinity/Infinitism high grade line, because there are a few omissions that I think would have been really cool to see in model kit form that we just haven't seen in a long time. Even goofier ones, if we got the Infinity version of Boss Borot, or an Infinitism version of Devilman, that would have been really funny. Or even getting more serious models, like an Infinitism version of Mazin Emperor G, or Aphrodite or Venus A, or Minerva X Infinitism versions would have been really cool to see. As it is now, we got a few Mazingers, and we got some protagonists for some other dynamic planning models and things like that. So I do have a bit of an odd relationship with the Mazinger Z series. I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, so if you don't want to listen to it, skip to the timestamp shown on screen now. But I have never seen the original Mazinger Z show, but my mom actually has. It's the only anime she's ever seen. So when I was first getting into anime back when I was in middle school and she saw that, she mentioned it to me and she thought all anime was kind of weird and perverted, which it kind of is if you look at commonly accepted fan service tropes, but I'm digressing even more than I already am. Because the only detail she remembered from the show wasn't even the name. It was the fact that there was a female robot in the series that used her tits as missiles, and that was the only thing she remembered, and thought that's just what anime was. It was just weird and horny. So I didn't really care enough to look into it and see what show she was referring to, but years later down the line, when I was getting to Super Robot Wars, I'm playing Super Robot Wars V, get to the stage where you get all the Mazinger Z units, and I see Venus A's breast missile attack, and it immediately clicks that that was the show my mom was talking about. So yeah, because of that kind of formative memory, I will my first thought when thinking of the Mazinger Z show is going to be the show with the breast missile attack. So a little bit of a weird relationship with this show, but I do really love this design, and figured this was probably a good model to start with because I do plan on looking at Mazinger Kaiser Infinity, and it's probably a good idea to have this kit as a baseline to compare it to. So getting into the box art here, I do really love this style of box art. They of course go with the painting style that we've become accustomed to with most modern high grades, except the way they frame the shot and everything makes Mazinger Z look very heroic, very monumental, very statuesque, and I really do love the framing of this art, which they do carry over to all of the rest of the Infinitism line. So very cool box art here. On the bottom of the box, we get the full painted build of the Mazinger Z Infinity version, showing off all of the attacks you can recreate and some of the equipment it has, with the Jet Scrander, the large kind of jet pack that it wears when it wants to take flight, and of course the iconic Rocket Punch attack that was invented in the original Mazinger Z show, I believe, and has been taken by countless mecha anime since. Of course the Iron Cutters, which is essentially a rocket punch just with big blades coming out of the forearms, the drill missiles that you can use by replacing some of the elbow parts, of course the breast fire with the giant chest plate that Mazinger Z has, being able to emit a giant heat beam, which is pretty cool. And that's been recreated with a multi-layered structure here, which should look really great once you fully build the model. And then of course talking about being able to remove the hover plighter to show that Koji's actually in Mazinger or not. And then on the other side we have some information about the Mazinger Z Infinity movie, again created to commemorate the 45th anniversary of the original show, as well as the Mazinger Z Infinity lineup as of the release of this kit, which I think that at that point they only plan to make the Mazinger Z Infinity version and the Great Mazinger Infinity version, because we've gotten multiple infinitism models after that, which I am planning to take a look at all of them at some point. But for right now, let's just focus on Mazinger Z Infinity. So inside the box, we will get 7 bags of runners, which is about expected for a larger model like Mazinger Z Infinity here. And of course, you will get this standard style manual here talking about the development of the Mazinger Z Infinity movie, and you get a full painted build model there alongside the box art. On the back, a lot of what you saw on the sides of the box with information on things like the hover plighter, the breast fire, the jet scrander, the rocket punch, etc., etc. You get a full accessory spread here talking about the jet scrander, accessories for the rocket punch and the iron cutters, some different hand option parts, and an adapter to mount Mazinger Z when you want to have it on a stand flying around. Then of course you get your color guide here on the bottom. So I do know that this is going to be using an injection silver for all the silver parts across Mazinger Z. I don't think I'm going to repaint it, because I think for a more gritty, muted version of Mazinger Z, like the one here, I think the injection silver actually does look pretty good, more so than the shiny metallic silver that would happen if you were to paint it yourself. So getting into the manual then, of course, you will have your parts list here, which does look pretty typical for a large super robot. This isn't going to be a super involved model or anything, it's just most of the parts are bigger to accommodate it being, well, a super robot. And of course, you are going to be getting an action base 4 in here, the exact same one that you would see in most Super Robot Wars kits, which is always really nice to see. Love when they include stands in these model kits. Getting into the construction then, you will of course start with the hover plighter, which does look fairly simple, but I do believe it is going to be completely color separated, so we'll see if it's entirely color accurate or not, but it does look like it might be. Then we get into the head, which does look quite simple, but there is a ton of detailing on the parts, as you can see with all the surface detail here on the armor surrounding the hover plighter. And on, I don't know how you can see that, but there is going to be a bunch of texturing in the kind of mouth mask that goes on Mazinger Z there. Then you get into your arms, which does look very simple. It looks like a simplified version of something like the high-grade Daigengar, if you ever built that. Any of the high-grade, larger super robot kits, this does look like a very simple version of something like that. But I still think it should end up looking pretty good at the end of the build, given how detailed everything is. Then you get into your legs here, very similar to the arms. It's going to be fairly simple, lots of hollow spaces, pretty much what you would expect from a typical high grade. You get into the chest here, which will have some nice layering, a bunch of auxiliary joints for things like ab crunch articulation. You of course mount your big chest plate there for the breast fire, talk about docking the hover plighter, get into building up your action base 4, and then you build the jet scrander, which does look like it's going to have some nice layering, but I'm pretty sure all the color correcting stickers are going to be for small details on the jet scrander, so we'll see how that looks once the kit's fully built. Then of course talking about mounting the jet scrander onto Mazinger Z itself, talking about mounting this ring around the sides locking into the jet scrander. Presumably that's the adapter that's going to be used to show the Mazinger Z in flight. And talking about using the stand to show the Mazinger Z firing off a rocket punch, changing out the elbow parts to show it firing off some drill missiles, and then talking about putting blades on the forearms to recreate the iron cutters. So yeah, does look like it's going to be a fairly simple build, but I still think it should look pretty impressive at the end of the day between the size of the model as well as the amount of surface detail on it. As for what we get inside the bags, 13 runners, which again is kind of expected for a model kit like this, as well as of course this fairly small color correcting sticker sheet only for use with parts for the jet scrander, for some wraparound parts for the thrusters and things like that. So as for the runners themselves, so these runners at the time were all going to be brand new for the Mazinger Z Infinity version. So of course, starting with runner A here with a design date of 2018, printed in July of 2025, it's of course going to be our multicolored runner coming in 4 different colors. You get a high gloss black here for many of the armor parts for things like the torso and the top of the torso with the collar and things like that. You get a plain clear up here for an adapter part for kind of holding the Mazinger Z while it's flying, as well as a part for the hover plighter. You get a glossy yellow here for some accent parts for the jet scrander, the head, etc. And then you will get a really nice clear red down here for our 2 parts to show the rocket punch actually flying out in front of the Mazinger, as well as the 2 parts for the chest plate to fire off the breast fire. And you can really see the really nice layered detail of the red parts there. So that should look really great on the kit. And I do really like the kind of high gloss thing they're going for with the parts here. Runners B1 and B2 with with the right part of both shared between the two, going to be in this like really dark purple, again, also in this really nice high gloss finish. For many of the armor parts seen throughout the kit, for parts for things like the legs, the arms, the feet, you see all of our hand option parts over here, etc. Runners C1 and C2, with C2 being a copy of the bottom part of C1, going to be all of the silver parts seen throughout the kit, which is going to be in an injection silver, but does look noticeably a bit nicer than other injection silvers because of the glossy finish that many of the parts in this kit have. So I don't think I'm going to be repainting this just because I do like how, I guess, cohesive this looks with the other high gloss parts seen across the kit. But this is going to be parts for things like the blades for the iron cutters, parts for the torso, armor parts for things like the arms, as well as parts for the head with things like the lower face mask there with some really nice texturing. I don't know how well you can see that, but there is a bunch of like ventilation texture in there that looks really nice. 2 of runner D for this very small runner here, only containing some auxiliary armor parts in a high gloss black. Runners E1 and E2 in this glossy red, with E2 being a copy of the top part of E1, going to be all the red parts seen across this kit, mostly for the jet scrander, with parts for things like the wings, the center unit, as well as some parts for the hover plighter, like the body here. We will be getting runners F1 and F2 in this primer frame gray for all of the frame and joint parts seen throughout the kit. And for a kit as large as this, yeah, there isn't going to be a whole lot of frame in here to facilitate like movement and things like that. You will get frame parts for things like the legs, the knees, parts for, I believe, the feet, various joint parts down here, a part for, I think, the collar and the torso, parts for the upper leg that connect into the hips, parts for the hips, etc. And then you will get your action base for here, a large black hexagonal base, and the clear parts both for a main arm to hold the Mazinger Z itself if it wants to fly, as well as some small sub-stands with sub-arms for articulating things like the rocket punch or the iron cutters. So you're really glad that this was included and should help the Mazinger Z pull off some more dynamic posing than it otherwise would be able to. So yeah, that's it for all the runners. I'm really expecting this to build up into a really cool model, so I'll see you after that build. Alright, welcome back. Here's the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version, snap-built, panel-lined, and lightly painted, and I have it here without the jet scrander because the manual and the promo material and all that treat it like an accessory, so for the purposes of this video, I will as well. So, getting right into the build, this kit is pretty much what I expected, being a more simplified version of some of the super robots seen in the high-grade Super Robot Wars kits, like the high-grade Daigenguar, Cybaster, Gun Leon, etc. So what that means is there isn't all that much frame inside of this kit, apart from what you see visible in things like the elbows, knees, tops of the legs, etc. However, what is there does allow for this kit to have a surprising range of articulation, especially given its kind of size and bulk being a super robot. However, the actual assembly itself is rather quick and streamlined, with some high points including the torso and the arms in particular that have a ton of different armor layering all across the arm, which very easily could have been a single part. That is, of course, to give you the ability to remove certain panels in the arm to mount the iron cutter blades and things like that. So the build for this kit is rather quick and rather streamlined. There were very few fit issues across this kit. The one that I will point out is in one of the hand options, there is supposed to be a tab to secure the back of the hand into the part where the thumb is, in addition to some pegs in the middle where the kind of middle of the back of the hand is. That tab didn't quite align right with the gap into the thumb, and it snapped off and flew off somewhere I couldn't find it. That doesn't seem to have impacted the ability for the back of the hand to stick to the main body of the hand with the fingers, but that did leave a bit of a hollow gap that is a little bit unsightly. Apart from that, the build is fairly unremarkable, fairly quick. You can get it done within a day if you have a couple hours to build. So yeah, the build for this kit is adequate but satisfying, with the parts layering up in a rather nice way, especially in the torso, with all of the silver parts kind of sandwiching together at the bottom, and a couple of auxiliary geometric details in the back of the torso that kind of layer on. Again, that's to facilitate the mounting of accessories. There's a cap piece that can be removed to mount the jet scrander, but it is really nice that they kept all of that in mind when designing this kit. Usually in kits like this, you will have hard points or slots or whatever for mounting shields and things like that just exposed when the shield or the accessory is just not on. This kit, they did keep that in mind and had a bunch of cap parts to cover up all of those holes and mounting points to really give this kit a complete look while none of the accessories are mounted, and that is very much appreciated. So coming back to this kit in the booth before we get into aesthetics, just to point out there aren't really any stability issues of the Mazinger Z here itself without the jet scrander. Of course, once you mount the jet scrander on, this kit becomes significantly more back heavy. You do need to pay attention to that while you're doing posing. However, because the jet scrander doesn't kind of jut out too far from the back while it's mounted, it should be less of a big deal compared to things like the high-grade Zirius that I took took a look at last video. So getting into aesthetics now, I will of course talk about the color correcting stickers and any details you'll have to paint in yourself before I get into my opinions on this design. So of course I did end up using all of the color correcting stickers on this sheet, and they are all going to be used on the jet scrander. So stickers 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to be the small black stripes on this large yellow fin on the back of the jet scrander there. You can see these black stripes on either side. And stickers 5 and 6 are going to be wrapping around these two yellow thruster details here, kind of on the sides of the jet scrander. Apart from that, there are no color correcting stickers used on this kit, but that does not mean it is entirely color accurate. There are a few parts you're going to have to paint in yourself. So there are various details all over the wings of the jet scrander that are supposed to be the same color as the frame. I just ended up shading it in using a black panel liner. You see details like here on the wings, kind of breaking up the middle of the wings and all that. That's supposed to be frame poking through, I believe, and I think it's supposed to be in a gunmetal, but I just shaded it with black panel liner and it looks all right doing that. And of course, they're going to be the underside of the wings as well. On the kind of belt adapter piece to kind of show that the jet scrander is secured to Mazinger Z over there, there are some gaps in this belt section that need to be painted in the same color as the frame. I used Dispay's gunmetal paint marker in order to paint in these two sections here, and that ended up turning out okay. And in the hover plier, you can see there's a tiny yellow strip on the front of it right below the clear part for the cockpit. That needs to be painted in yellow. Of course, I did not expect that to be color separated given how small it is, and I used Dispay's Mecha yellow marker for that. So yeah, that's everything you need to paint in yourself. This kit is going to be largely color accurate, which is really nice, especially given this very detailed design. One part I will also note is regarding nub marks. On the silver parts, if any of you have seen my Master Grade Amazing Red Warrior video, you'll know that the silver parts for the gun blades did leave a rather unsightly black nub mark on all of the silver parts. The same happens here with this injection silver. So you can see here I did end up patching it up with just a drop of metallic silver paint from the silver Gundam marker. And at a glance on the shelf, it looks okay, but especially in my photo booth here, underneath like direct light and all that, the difference in finish between the paint and the actual silver part is very apparent. So you may want to just repaint the silver parts entirely if that bothers you. It doesn't really for me, because at an arm's length when I'm viewing it on the shelf under normal room lighting, it's not going to be something I'm going to notice unless I'm like very close up specifically looking for it. But it's just something to keep in mind if you decide to get this kit. As for my opinions on this design, I talked about the unboxing, but I do really love the reworked proportions of the Mazinger Z Infinity version. The way things are slimmed down to make it look more dynamic, a little bit more athletic, as opposed to the very round, bulbous design of the classic 70s Mazinger Z, and I really do love how this looks. It does look a little bit incomplete without the jet scrander though, as you'll see once it's fully equipped with it in the posing section. That really helps this kit look very impressive, but it's already impressive as it is now. Again, with that fractured look, while I'm not the biggest fan of it, does help contribute to a more, I guess, detailed, slightly realistic look, given all of the armor separation and things like that. Really enhances the statuesque nature of it, and the clear parts here for the breast fire on the chest look amazing. Those molded detail parts on the back kind of being visible through the front do really help give this a sense of detail and fully recreate how it looked in the Infinity movie. So that looks amazing. I did check, it is unfortunately not UV reactive, so you can't set up a display where your Mazinger Z Infinity has its like chest glowing like it's firing the breast fire. That would have been cool to see, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. So yeah, I do really love the proportions of this design, and I love the Infinity redesigns in general. The fracturing of the armor is something I'm warming up to a little bit, but is still a little bit off-putting to me. For a quick size comparison, here's the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version next to a standard-sized high-grade being the high-grade Blue Destiny Unit 1, and a standard-sized master-grade being the master-grade Gem Sniper 2 White Dingo team. So as you can see, even though this is on the smaller end of super robots, in the 1/144th scale, this is a very large kit for a high grade, towering over your standard high grade and being in line with your typical master grade. So yeah, again, if you have the real grade or high grade Sazabi, this is going to be about the same size as it. So it will take up a fair amount of space on your shelf, and especially with the jet scrander, if I just hold it behind Mazinger like it has it on, as you can see, this will take up a ton of width on your shelf, so that is definitely something to also keep in mind. The very large flight pack on this will take up a ton of space on your shelf, and that may be a reason that you may want to remove the flight pack for posing, just because of how much space it takes up, even though it makes it look a lot more incomplete than it normally would. Of course, for your accessories, here's the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version with everything it comes with. As you can see, this is a rather complete accessory spread, even though pretty much all of Mazinger Z's weapons are integrated into the actual mech itself. Starting as per usual with your hand options, these are going to be using just swappable hands, and you will of course get the two two closed fists you see on the kit right now. And unfortunately, your two extra hand options are only for the right side. You will get this open expressive hand only for the right side, and you will get this flat hand only for the right side. The manual just says that you can use this with the iron cutter, even though I'm pretty sure like a lot of when the iron cutters used, Mazinger Z just has its hand in a fist, like it's doing a rocket punch, but yeah, you can use this hand for that if you want. So yeah, those are all of the hand options. I do wish they included duplicates for the left side. You've heard me say this a lot before, but yeah, it's just a shame that it also applies to this kit. As for your adapters, you will get this fork adapter if you want to have the Mazinger Z just standard in the air on the Action Base 4 over there. You will get this adapter here for having Mazinger Z kind of flying horizontally. You will just have it like lay flat across this with this on its belly, and you can have it flying through the air horizontally like it's about to use the Scrander cutter or the Southern Cross knives. So you'll see that in the posing section. You will get this adapter here for attaching the Jet Scrander onto Mazinger Z's back. And then you will get these parts here. I'm not really sure if this counts as an adapter, but this is of course a kind of belt that is supposed to show that the Jet Scrander is secured around Mazinger's stomach. So these two silver parts will just wrap around the stomach and attach into the Jet Scrander, and this yellow buckle piece will just secure the two silver parts together. In terms of the rest of your accessories, you will of course get two effect parts here in clear red for showing the fists flying through the air separate from Mazinger Z, doing either the rocket punch or using the iron cutters. Speaking of the iron cutters, you will of course get two sets of blades for the iron cutters. They're little part separated armor panels on the sides of the forearms. You just take them off, put the blades in, and then you have the fists using the iron cutters. So that will look pretty cool. You see that in the posing section. When the fists are detached from the arms in their place, you will put these two parts here to show the drill missile launchers embedded inside of the arms. And if you want to use the drill missiles with the forearms still attached, you will use these two adapters instead. The arms will just slot onto this peg here, and then you could have the arms kind of folded up like it's exposing the drill missile launchers. So you see that in the posing section. Of course, for use with the fists and all of that, you will get this Action Base 4 right here. We've seen this in Super Robot Wars kits and things like that, so this is a very solid base, especially for a kit this large. And you will get this smaller stand to use with the black hexagonal base of the Action Base 4 for just having the fist fly through the air. So see that in the posing section. You will of course get the main accessory here, which in my opinion shouldn't really be considered an accessory at all. It's just part of Mazinger Z, and it looks very incomplete without it. Here is of course the Jet Scrander, very nicely color separated here in a slightly subdued red coupled with a bold glossy yellow. So this does look really great, and the detail lines actually do look pretty good on the Jet Scrander here. I'm a little bit torn about all of the fracturing in the armor in things like the legs and torso, but in the wings here it does look quite good. Of course, the wings can articulate. If you have it flying on its own, you have the wings swept back. When it's attached onto Mazinger Z, you sweep the wings up like this. So yeah, apart from that, no articulation on the Jet Scrander whatsoever. And then of course you have the accessory that's mounted onto Mazinger Z right now, the hover plighter in its head. So you can take it out if you want to display it separately, although there is a bit of a fit issue with the hover plighter. I don't know how well you could see that, but as you can see, the actual hover parts are very, very loose. You see it just dropping down like that, and it does take a lot to just get it to stick up to begin with. So yeah, while you can just display this separately with how loose the actual joint for the hover plighter is, yeah, I don't know if you would exactly want to do that. They do tend to drop very easily. But of course, when you want to attach it to Mazinger Z, you just fold up the hover parts and it will dock onto a little tab in the head like so. So yeah, the Mazinger Z does come with most of the accessories you would expect. Some nice luxury to have would be some separate brighter chest parts to show that it's using the breast fire, some duplicate hand option parts for the left side, maybe some effect parts to show that the Southern Cross knives are flying out of the Jet Scrander, or maybe a brighter optional eyepiece to show that it's using the photonic beam. But those are all nice luxury to haves, and in terms of what it comes with, this is a very complete accessory spread. So getting into articulation now, starting with the head as per usual for an upward look. Mazinger Z can look up quite far, which is very nice. If you're going to have it flying horizontally, you do want it to be looking up a bit in the direction that it's flying. It can look down into its own chest. You get some very nice side to side tilt, and of course you can 360 the head about the ball joint. Just be careful you don't accidentally pop off these spikes in the sides of the head. In the shoulders then, for a shoulder swing, you get a rather minor shoulder swing of maybe 15 degrees. The arm can of course 360 in its socket. Just be careful you don't collide with the chest parts for the breast fire. The shoulder armor can move up independently of the arm to facilitate about a 75-degree bend before the arm will want to pop out of the socket. You get full rotation in both the upper bicep as well as in the elbow, because of course that's where the forearm detaches for using the rocket punch. A double bend in the elbow with a really nice armor separation gimmick with one of the armor plates kind of folding and retracting into the forearm while it bends gives a 135-degree bend, quite nice. And of course the wrist is going to be on a ball joint hinge combo. Unfortunately though, you can't really articulate the ball part of the joint, so it's really only useful for rotation, and the wrist is there to give a bit of kind of extension action right there. In the torso then, for a forward ab crunch, you get a minor forward ab crunch. For a backwards ab crunch, also a minor backwards ab crunch, some minor side to side, and of course you can 360 the torso about a peg. In the waist then, these side skirts can move up a tiny bit to facilitate the leg joints, and there is no real front or back skirt to speak of. It's just burning the iron diaper here. There is a bit of a hip drop mechanism for each of the individual legs. They can slide down like so for better articulation. And in the legs, for forward kicks, you get just over 90 degrees before you'll want to pop the side skirts out of their sockets. For side raises, you will get about 75 degrees. And for back kicks, you will get over 90 degrees. This little bit of armor here is actually attached to the leg, and it can rotate slightly, although I don't know exactly why you would want to do that. You will, of course, get full rotation in the upper thigh, a double knee bend, although it is a little bit difficult to articulate the first part of the bend. It does feel like it's almost coming out of the leg. It does feel a little bit unnatural. Will give you a little bit more than a 90-degree bend, which does just seem to be a limit with the proportions, with the very thick kind of cylindrical legs here. In the feet then, there is no heel-toe separation for overall toe dips. You get a fairly nice toe dip. For a toe raise, you get a minor toe raise. You get some fairly nice side to side, although it does seem like you get more out than in. You get about 45 degrees out, maybe 15 degrees in, and you can, of course, 360 it about a ball joint. So overall articulation for the Mazinger Z is fairly mediocre, but it should still be able to pull off all of the iconic poses you would want it to. Speaking of which, let's get the Mazinger Z in some poses. So getting the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version into a spin, starting with the usual running pose. No gutting here because Mazinger Z doesn't have any handheld ranged weapons, but here it is in pretty much one of the only ways that I would consider posing it kind of without the jet scrander mounted, which is having it run relocate to a target, or you can have a stationary attacking a target while the jet scrander flies into dock with the Mazinger Z. So I don't think it was intended to be able to have the jet scrander up on the stand just by itself, not mounted onto Mazinger Z, but I was able to balance it on the fork adapter on the included Action Base 4 and was able to get it balanced fairly convincingly, having it coming here flying into dock with Mazinger Z. So this does demonstrate a few things. One, Mazinger Z actually does look surprisingly good on the ground, especially when you're able to have all of the limbs fully extended to emphasize the height of this super robot, as well as emphasizing the slight athleticism of the frame of these reworked proportions, which really does help give this kit a lot more presence on your shelf. However, Mazinger Z doesn't look the greatest in motion on the ground. It doesn't look particularly good while it's running like this because of the way the knees are, the balance of the kit and things like that. You can't really have it going all out fully running and sprinting. This was about as dynamic as I could get, especially with the very kind of blobby feet that aren't particularly large in comparison to the unit itself. So for all of the things that this kit can do and all of the versatility and posing that it has, which you'll be seeing later, this isn't really it, and I think most other grounded poses definitely trump this in terms of how good the kit looks in it, so would not consider doing this on the shelf. So here is Mazinger Z crouching, firing a rocket punch upwards, and I was trying to get it to recreate the iconic kind of two-handed rocket punch pose where one arm is bracing and gripping the other while it aims and fires off the rocket punch. So while the punch flying up actually does look pretty good and convincing with Mazinger Z crouched like this, what doesn't look great is having the other arm actually grip onto the firing arm. So because your only non-fist hand options are going to be on the right side, the only way to do this is to have it firing off the left hand, and in general the shoulder articulation is not good enough. Your shoulder swing is not good enough. You cannot get the arm out in front of the unit well enough to be able to actually grip the other arm. So here it actually kind of looks like Mazinger Z has been wounded and it's gripping the stump where its arm used to be. So yeah, if you're going to do a rocket punch pose, it's much better to do the one that they show in the promo material with one fist kind of bent elbow at its side while it fires off the other one in a much more confident way, as opposed to this controlled way, which emphasizes the, control of actually firing the rocket punch as well as perhaps the power of it, because it needs to brace one arm with the other in order to actually fire it off. And this also shows what I was talking about earlier, that Mazinger Z actually does look much more complete with the jet scrander on, and it looks great, but especially with the jet scrander on, I would not have this kit crouching. Again, being a super robot, you want its size and heft to be on full display, and to do that, you definitely don't want it crouching. So yeah, while the rocket punch is really cool and definitely a way that I would consider posing this kit on the shelf, having it crouch certainly is not. And now, of course, here is Mazinger Z in the air, laying flat horizontally on the clear adapter here, flying forward very heroically with the jet scrander, about to use the scrander cutter or firing the Southern Cross knives or things like that. So this is a pretty interesting way to pose the kit, and it does unfortunately take up volume in a way that's very unorthodox, and I feel like a lot of people aren't going to have room to accommodate on their shelves depending on what your setup is, but this is a pretty cool way to display your Mazinger Z, a very kind of classic super robot way where it's like Superman flying through the air, which is pretty interesting. It definitely does work great for this kit. Again, the poses that work best for this kit are the ones where it's very kind of statuesque, monumental, very classically heroic, very kind of antithetical to a lot of ways you would want to pose like modern super robots, where they're very dynamic and very, I guess, kind of kinetic in their melee action poses and things like that. No, Mazinger Z is kind of like a big monumental statue, and it really shows in poses like this, where it does look great and impressive in these very kind of classic poses that a lot of other kits would look a bit underwhelming in. It feels just right for Mazinger Z. What I will comment on in the negative for this pose is the actual clear adapter for having Mazinger Z laying flat on its stomach like this. It didn't seem all that secure, because the way I think it works is you kind of lay Mazinger Z's stomach flat across the adapter and slide Mazinger down so the buckle that the jet scrander is using to kind of secure itself to the torso catches against a ledge in the adapter to kind of stop Mazinger Z from slipping off the adapter. That connection isn't exactly the most secure, and Mazinger Z did fall off this adapter a couple of times before I got it balanced just right on the Action Base 4 here, so it's a little bit precarious to get into a pose like this, but it looks awesome and is definitely a way I would consider posing this kit on the shelf. So another way to pose the kit in the air, here's Mazinger Z leaping forward on the fork adapter, punching down with the iron cutter, doing a rocket punch attack with the other arm kind of getting ready to throw out its own punch with the iron cutters ready. Unfortunately, this kit does not come with a second sub stand to have Mazinger Z firing off both rocket punches at the same time, so this is what you'll have to settle with if you want to do something like that. So this looks awesome, and I'll leave it up for a bit while I get into the conclusion. The other poses that will come up while I'm talking will demonstrate Mazinger Z using its other armaments and things like that. So in conclusion, the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version is a really cool kit, and definitely does justice to this very important design in the history of mecha anime and things like that. In terms of the build, this is going to be rather simplistic, but it does everything you would want it to. All of the detail of the Mazinger Z Infinity version is preserved. There is very minimal painting you are going to have to do in order to get this kit color accurate, but the build is very quick and streamlined, feeling more akin to something like an RE100 that has a bit more posability than anything more involved, like some of the high-grade Super Robot Wars kits like the Daigengwar and things like that, which are fairly involved. This kit is less involved than those, but it doesn't really need all of that involvement to be fully part separated and color accurate and things like that. This kit does look great. In terms of accessories, this kit comes with nearly everything you would expect it to, coming with accessories to show it off firing the rocket punch with or without the iron cutters deployed, coming with a stand to have this kit in the air, adapters to have it either just kind of normally in the air or laying flat horizontally doing a Superman flying pose forward, as well as coming with adapters to show the elbows kind of folded back to be firing off the drill missiles. The only things I would say really are missing are duplicate hand option parts. While it comes with a decent spread of hand options for the right side, the left side only gets a closed fist, which is a little bit disappointing and does limit you in your posing options, which I feel like is one of the greatest strengths of this kit, where it works great in so many different posing options because it has so many different iconic poses and weapons to fire and things like that. You can really get a lot of mileage out of reposing this kit on your shelf every few months or so. So getting a little bit more in detail on the aesthetics, because the build, I think I've said everything I already want to say, where it's fairly streamlined, fairly simplistic, minimal frame and things like that. Aesthetically, this kit is simply amazing. It does recreate pretty much everything that you would want for the Mazinger Z Infinity version, with minimal color correcting stickers, only applying some black stripe details on the jet scrander. There's very minimal painting you will have to do yourself, just a tiny yellow stripe on the hover plier that honestly isn't very noticeable if you decide to not paint it in, which isn't really a big deal. There are some gunmetal sections in the belt that wraps around the belly if you have the jet scrander equipped that needs to be painted in, but again, small details, and it isn't the biggest deal in the world if you decide to not paint them in. What is a bit of a big deal are going to be the nub marks on these silver parts, very similar to the gun blades of the Master Grade Amazing Red Warrior. This injection silver does leave some really nasty black nub marks after you snip the nubs and clean them up with sanding or shaving with a hobby knife or whatever, so If you're getting this kit and that bothers you, just have some silver paint on hand, just put a little drop of silver paint on the nub marks, and at the distance you'll be looking at this kit on the shelf. The difference in finish and those nub marks should not be noticeable. But yeah, aesthetically this kit is fantastic, nearly perfectly color accurate right out of the box, recreates all of the insane surface detail that the Infinity version has, and reworks the proportions to be much more appealing to modern audiences, which does look great. I think the retro version does have some of its charm, but in terms of just pure proportions, I definitely prefer this version over the retro 70s version. Again, in terms of accessories, pretty much comes with everything you would want in the box and gives you a ton of different posing options, which coupled for this kit's solid for its proportions articulation, does give you a ton of variety in posing. You can pull off most of the poses you would want to for this kit, with the only iconic pose this kit isn't able to pull off being the two-handed rocket punch pose, where you have one hand gripping the other arm while it fires off the rocket punch. Not being able to do that is a little bit disappointing, but this kit does pull off pretty much every other pose with aplomb. It looks great, it looks dynamic, it looks heroic, pretty much everything you would want this kit to be for being a modernized version of the first super robot. The articulation is slightly limited in certain areas, with the torso articulation being a little bit lackluster, although with this kind of design with the very relatively thick torso compared to a lot of others, I'm not exactly sure how much articulation people were expecting to get out of it, but the articulation in the knees is slightly lacking, and your kick articulation is also slightly lacking, with a lot of collision with the waist parts even after engaging the leg drop mechanism, which I wasn't entirely expecting, but still shouldn't pose too much of an obstacle in getting this kit into all of the iconic poses you would want it to have, or even some more dynamic poses, like what you should be seeing now with the Mazinger Z kind of descending from a leap while firing the drill missiles downward. That's a fairly dynamic pose that does work with the articulation this kit has. So would I recommend this kit? Absolutely. If you don't hate this design, this is again a very important kit to have in terms of the history of modern mecha anime, and it's Mazinger Z. It looks impressive on your shelf. It can pull up most of the poses you would want it to, especially engaging some of the effect parts like for the drill missiles or for the rocket punch or things like that. Also coming included with the stand to articulate those is really appreciated and helps this kit stand out quite a bit. It can do pretty much most of what you would want it to. It is a very amazing and unique design, especially if you're really only used to building Gunpla. It could be an excellent change of pace. It looks quite impressive on your shelf. It's a very important piece of history. What can I say? I really do love this kit, and I fully recommend it to anyone who doesn't hate the design. I feel like there's something here for most people in terms of just having this very impressive piece of history on your shelf. So that was my review of the high-grade Mazinger Z Infinity version. So I might be a little bit biased with how much I like this design, but you can let me know what you think of this kit if you have it in the comments down below. If you like reviews like these, make sure to sub and hit notification bell so you don't miss future uploads. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with the high-grade Genoa So Custom. Probably a more timely model to get to look at this week instead of this one, but hey, I'm not the biggest fan of the age designs, but hopefully that kit proves me wrong and proves to be a little bit interesting. I'm still kind of debating on when I want to take care of the Master Grade EXS Task Force Alpha version. It'll probably be delayed a little bit into the future when I have a lot more time, because disassembling and reassembling it as the EXS Gundam after I film all the footage for the S Gundam is a pretty daunting task that I'm not looking forward to, so that'll probably wait until, at the very earliest, next month around Thanksgiving or so, when I have more time to dedicate to a single kit like that. For now, with the time I do have, I would prefer to build up a bunch of different kits, just for the variety, because I feel like locking yourself into one project for so long is definitely not a great thing for your mental, especially now with all the work for grad school amping up and things like that. I have a bunch of midterms coming up, which is why I made a community post saying I would be fairly busy in the coming weeks and things like that. But for the video after the Genoa So Custom, I'm thinking of the RE100 Vigna Zirah. If any of you have any suggestions for kits that you would want me to take a look at, just let me know in the comments down below. If I have it, I'll consider taking a look at it. So I'll see you next time with my review of the Genoa So Custom.